Namaskar. I will continue my story on my books. When I look at the 60 and odd books I had written, actually they are going to be nearing some 65 and odd. If you count the second, third revised editions of some of the books and so on. I've already mentioned about the first 10%, 6 books. When I look at them, there are only about a dozen books which were singularly authored by me. I'm the sole author, about 12 of them. And I'm very proud of these books. This might be a big surprise to you that most of the other publications that I have are joint publications. In the next video, I will tell about who are all the co-authors, how did this happen and things like that. Quite a few of those co-authored, or certainly I took the lead role. That's a different issue. But the books I am proud of. The first book I've already mentioned is the result of my PhD thesis, Doctors in the Making. The second book, which I wrote all by myself, is a series of exercises on sales styles. This was an interesting concept. I had done this actually when I was in Delhi. I used to read Blake and Morton's The Grid. And in the grid, normally task-centered manager and people-centered manager, and he used to come up with a 9-9 style. Later, Uday Parikh added third dimension. But I came up when I looked at the salespeople, there were 4 types of salespeople. I have come across people who are centered towards the customer-centric salespeople. They are people who predominantly proudly talk about the product they are selling. And there are people who talk about their own accomplishments, how many they were able to sell and things like that. And there are people who use the brand of the company-centered kind of salespeople. So I conceptualized these 4 dimensions and developed a series of sales style exercises. First, I tried this in DCM for a group of salespeople. This was published by IE Learning Systems, which was promoted by Pandit Pathankar, Manohar Nadkarni, and a whole lot of others in Delhi. But I used it more effectively once I joined IIM Ahmedabad to conduct a series of experiments on students. This was not a book, this is more in the form of a series of exercises. If you want to really look at the book part of it, the first book I wrote was sometime in the year 1983-84, all by myself. Performance Appraisal, Theory and Practice. The reason for writing this book was that by the time I have already worked with, besides Larsen & Toubro, where we were struggling to implement the performance appraisal system, which was called HRD system, later joined BEML and tried to implement it, and worked with State Bank of India and their associates in a very intensive way. And we have had lots and lots of workshops in State Bank of India, State Bank of Indore, State Bank of Mysore, a whole lot of their subsidiaries and so on. Wherever we went in conducting performance appraisal workshops, I used to find people bringing in all issues related to the rest of the company, and they thought appraisal is the panacea for all problems they have had. So I used to get quite excited because I had a point of view where we maintained that appraisal should lead to development, and over-focusing on, in those days, KPIs, etc. While it's good, it helps you to plan, it is not enough and things like that. So it is this dissatisfaction and the consistent communication that I've been getting from managers from different companies where we work. I think I must have worked at least with a dozen companies. That prompted me to write a book on performance appraisal, in theory what it is and in practice what it is. This book went through a lot of revisions later, but I must say that I am very proud of the first book that I wrote, which was published by Vikas. AIMA and Vikas had some kind of a collaboration with them at that time. This book came out in 1984 and I was very proud. I carried a copy of this book to Indonesia when I was working with Dr. Parikh and Linton. And somebody in Indonesia saw this book and got very impressed. And in 1985, they translated into Bahasa Indonesia. So this is one book which was available in Indonesian language. I think they had 2 reprints. When I went sometime in 1997, I discovered there was a reprint. I mean, in Indonesia, if they reprint something and change the cover page and other things, they will never tell you. You only get to know from other sources. So when I went to work with Indorama, I got a copy of that, and I was told that this was being used by quite a few companies. Performance Appraisal Theory and Practice. This book, when I donated it to after AIMA, because I think stopped republishing this, donated it to the Academy of HRD to publish it as Appraising Performance for Development. This is the first revision of the book. And a decade later, I further revised it because a lot of changes were taking place. Performance Appraisal for Global Competitiveness. This was published by Sage. In fact, it was republished twice. And very recently, we came up with the 5th version of this. I requested my colleague Nandini to join me because she had very similar philosophy on performance management as development and so on. So this is now published by Routledge, Taylor and Francis, available in 2024. So that is the story of the book on performance appraisal theory and practice, which is now performance management. So it came out of a challenge I was facing all the time in my consulting assignments. In fact, you will find most of my books later are based partly on my passion coming out of an emotional response to things not going on well. So I think this is, when I look back, this seems to be a very important thing. If you want to write a book, you should be passionate about something. Sometimes the passion comes from criticism people are having about something not working, or an excitement that something is working very well. In my case, in many cases, it may be my own dissatisfaction with the way things are going on, or my own perception of opportunities that are available, I think that made to bring out books. Many of my edited books, about which I am not talking here, are responses to the events that are happening in the world. I'll talk about them elsewhere. The next book, which I have written all by myself without any assistance, is Readings in Human Resource Development. This book I have written because by the time I think I looked at HRD in education sector, looked at HRD in corporate sector, HRD in NGOs, and I've been writing off and on about my experiences in different places. So I put all these things together and tried to answer some of the basic questions in HRD. What is HRD? How it is being applied in government? What is its relevance for education? And so on. By the time I also wrote an article on the role of the new HRD Ministry, which was published in Economic Times. I picked up that particular article. So Readings in HRD is a compilation of most of my articles up till the year something like 1988. This book has been printed and reprinted. I have not added anything subsequently. You will find this even today. This was published by Oxford IVH. I don't know who publishes now, but I think I find this most of the time available in places. The next book after Readings in HRD is the HRD Missionary, about which I happen to speak also in the Academy of HRD. This was the 6 months for which I was supposed to be advisor to Ministry of HRD, but last minute, after I took leave from IIM Ahmedabad, I was told that Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi at that time visited HRD Ministry and said that the ministry is being run by largely advisors. So an offer that was made was quietly withdrawn, and I was on the road. I took the leave from IIM and I didn't know what to do. So I started doing a little bit of consulting work, because it's not right to rejoin when you have committed to institute, you are not going to teach. So in fact, the Ministry of HRD asked me to review NUPA, at that time NEPA, National Institute of Educational Planning. So I spent my time free, gratis, doing review of the National Institute. I was staying some part of the time in Delhi, but part of the time I was getting back to Ahmedabad. And during my consulting trips, I was doing quite some consulting with Voltas and some other companies. So that is when I found that there is a lot of misconceptions of HRD, and particularly those who implement HRD matter a lot in implementing it. In fact, I came up with the concept. I still remember the hotel in Bombay when I was sitting and I was trying with this idea and discussed it with a couple of people like Varnari Mirchandani of Crompton Greaves, Susan Varghese also of Crompton Greaves, and I floated the idea that HRD has to be missionary. This is because I observed those people who are committed to HRD work like missionaries. They are willing to sacrifice a lot of other things and single-mindedly focus on HRD. That's when I wrote this very simple book, which is hardly about 40 pages, along with the other things, HRD Missionary. This was published by Oxford IBH, was available at 50 rupees. They gave it 50%, 25 rupees a copy, and this was all given free to delegates of the National HRD Network conference being held at Madras. It was coordinated by Sambamurthy. So this became 200, 300 copies were distributed. This became a very popular book. Even today, I think this is a very popular book. We have revised this. Oxford IBH sees it to be a publisher. TVRLS took over, and we have this book available. I've also put it in Amazon for those who are interested. I think I'll be soon reviewing this book and rewriting this book with some marginal modifications, because HRD Missionary continues to be a relevant kind of a concept in human resource development. The next book I must mention is the book on which I wrote from the Commonwealth Secretariat, London, when I was invited to be a HRD consultant for the Commonwealth Secretariat, and the job was examine the human resource development practices of Commonwealth countries and answer the question, what made some countries after independence, their independence, develop so fast, so well, and among the common countries, some countries continue to lag. So what is the secret of countries like Canada, Australia, UK, and so on, who developed very well and made a mark, whereas countries like India, Pakistan, and so on have not measured up to mark? So can you draw some lessons? I spent 6 months at the Institute of Development Studies, Sussex, and all that I was doing was answering this question by reviewing literature. Then I visited World Bank, visited JF Kennedy School, had detailed discussion with Sam Petruda, who happened to be chairing the commission. And in fact, I was supposed to visit some of the African countries. I didn't do that, but I certainly revisited India, look at some of the experiments that were going on. So in this, I took a national view of the human resource development function, and then wrote the book HRD, Human Resource Development Experiences, Cases and Concepts. This was published by Sage. This was the first publication. But the same book with modifications, and a lot of modifications, was brought out as, I don't say same book, but with inputs from this book. There was a document called Foundation for Future, chaired by Sam Petruda, and the Commonwealth Secretariat brought it out to be circulated at Commonwealth heads of government. Unfortunately, the heads of government did not take this particular document as seriously, except that people who are involved in it, I think, always believe in whatever has been said. I think this book treats education at a national level, and talks of Human Development Index, and also talks of the importance of investments in girl child, investments in adult education, importance of primary and secondary education, science education, technical education, environment, importance of government, importance of decentralization, and so many concepts have been talked about it in this particular book. This is a wonderful book. I'm very proud of this book. This book still is available on Amazon.com. I will continue about the other books which I have written singularly in the second edition of this. I didn't think that I will take 15 minutes, but I have already taken. I'll stop here and pick this up in the next video.